United States of America to the Republic of Zimbabwe. Thank you for coming. The ambassador will deliver remarks and then she will take questions from the media. Please wait until you're called upon so we can get through as many questions as possible. And when you do ask your question, please state your name and give your media affiliation. With that, it is my honor to introduce Ambassador Pamela Tremont, U.S. Ambassador to the Republic of Zimbabwe.
Hi, everybody. Big crowd. I hope you guys weren't promised Taylor Swift or something. You're going to be very disappointed. Thank you so much for being here today. It is an honor and a privilege to be the ambassador of the United States to the Republic of Zimbabwe. My husband and son are delighted to join me in Zimbabwe to continue the important work of building strong, respectful relations between our two countries. This is my third time serving in Africa, having served in both Zambia and Mauritius, as well as on South African affairs in the Department of State. I've been a member of the U.S. Foreign Service for over 30 years, and I'm proud to work with people around the world to build a safer, healthier, and more prosperous world for us all. During my discussion with President Mnangagwa yesterday, I delivered President Biden's greetings, and we discussed how to improve ties between our two countries. The United States continues to support the people of Zimbabwe and their efforts to build a more just, prosperous, and healthy society. We share their goal of building a self-reliant, self-sufficient Zimbabwe, one with whom we can partner to confront global challenges and advance mutual interests. As ambassador, I will work with government, civil society, business, and local communities to encourage transparent, democratic institutions that respect the will of the people and create broad-based economic growth. We will pursue these mutual interests while respecting Zimbabwe's sovereignty so Zimbabweans can realize a better future for themselves. The U.S. commitment to the Zimbabwean people is clear. Since independence, the U.S. government has provided $5 billion in humanitarian, health, and development assistance to the Zimbabwean people, $1 billion of that in the last 3 years alone. The impact of that is extraordinary. Over 1.2 million Zimbabweans are leading healthier, longer lives because of the HIV treatment they received through our PEPFAR program. More than 3,000 acres of land have been made available for cultivation as a result of our demining program. Together, we're returning land to farmers that had been unsafe for communities and their livestock since your hard-fought liberation struggle. But El Nino and its drought have made farming harder than usual this year. That's why yesterday I informed President Mnangagwa, and today I'm pleased to announce to you that in 2024, the U.S. people will give $62 million to the Zimbabwean people to counter the effects of the current drought in Zimbabwe. This funding, including $39 million of new money, will address short-term food security and long-term strategies to improve agricultural practices and strengthen community resilience. But broad-based economic prosperity is impossible without strong democratic institutions, good public health, and regional security. The United States supports these things because they are critical elements for Zimbabweans to chart their own future. In my conversation with President Mnangagwa, I offered to collaborate on improving the investment climate in Zimbabwe, to expand economic opportunities for people and communities, strengthen our business ties, and attract investors to look closely at Zimbabwe's educated labor force and long-term growth potential. But I can't do this alone. The Zimbabwean government and people need to share their story that Zimbabwe is a good business partner that combats corruption, provides certainty in regulatory, monetary, and tax policy, and enjoys unbiased rule of law. Zimbabwe has a rich history, enormous human talent, and abundant natural resources. It shows promise as a great leader in Southern Africa and a vibrant participant in global conversations. and the United States seeks to partner with Zimbabwe to confront global challenges such as climate change, conflict, and pandemic response. Zimbabwe's potential is limitless. We look forward to deepening our partnership to advance mutual interests. I'd like to thank the government of Zimbabwe, the Zimbabwean people, the diplomatic corps, and my colleagues at the U.S. Embassy for the warm welcome. And finally, I want to thank you, the media, for the important work that you do. You seek the truth, you promote the free flow of information in the public interest, and you hold those in power accountable. This work is critical and another important element in a strong democracy. Now that I've presented my credentials to President Mnangagwa, I look forward to getting to know you and the Zimbabwean people better. Thank you again for coming today, and I look forward to taking your questions.
Thank you, Ambassador. I take it there are questions. Why don't we start maybe with a first question from Tobias of VOA.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Welcome to Zimbabwe.
Thank you.
So the USA is viewed by governments like ours, if I'm to go back to their statements time and again, as wanting to impose what I could term the US kind of democracy on countries like Zimbabwe. And failure to adhere to such a democracy might result in punitive measures, sanctions again in courts, like for Zimbabwe. Why does the US Embassy, or are you imposing your kind of democracy as the democracy that should be followed by everyone in the world?
I appreciate that question and the opportunity to clarify. The democratic principles that we advocate for in Zimbabwe are based on the rights and protections that are enshrined in Zimbabwe's constitution. These are the rights and protections that the Zimbabwean people fought and died for in the liberation struggle. They also happen to be many of the shared protections in our own constitution, but we believe that Zimbabwe should uphold its own constitution because that's what the people here deserve. On a second point, I personally believe, and I think the rest of the US government believes, that these rights and freedoms and principles are the pathway to economic prosperity. In our experience, the freedom and inclusion of the entire population into the economic system is what led us to be the economically prosperous country that we are, and that's why we recommend it to Zimbabwe and other countries.
Next question. Question?
Okay, thank you. My name is Tafadza Nkadzino from State of the Nation. So over the years, there is a mutual desire for both Zimbabwe and the US to have good relations, but through the years, again, we've seen that the relations remain frosty despite the fact that both ends want the relations to be made. What are the prospects of us going forward seeing a stronger ties between Zimbabwe and the US?
Well, when I had my conversation with President Mnangagwa yesterday, we both agreed that we wanted improved ties between the United States. But we also noted that we will not always agree on everything, and I hope to have frank and respectful conversations with him and his government on the things where we agree as well as the things where we don't agree. That's what diplomacy is. We talk, we share values, we share ideas, and we offer suggestions. That's the essence of what we do. Look, I didn't come here to golf. I came here to solve problems, and we can't do that without real conversations. So I will take President Mnangagwa at his word that he wants to improve relations, and I'm ready to roll up my sleeves and make that happen.
Over here on the left of the black jacket.
My name is Chimono from Reuters. Last year, the US said that they pulled out of the DeTalks that were happening between government and several IFIs. Can we see the US coming back into the DeTalks, and what do you think about the general political climate in the country?
Those are two distinct questions. We think the AFDB process is a really useful forum to discuss the kind of reforms that the international financial institutions need for Zimbabwe to access the concessionary loans that it wants. We were an active participant in those talks. Unfortunately, we had to put a pause on that after the elections that we did not find free and fair, and that a lot of other institutions did not find free and fair. We're looking forward to new democracy and governance indicators that will give us a sense of where the government is and its democracy and governance pathway so that we can return to the table and continue those talks. The second part of your question was,
Your general assessment of the political climate in the country.
right. You know, democracy is a messy business. Someone said it's the worst form of government except for all the others. And so we, like everybody else, are on a journey to a more perfect union. And I look forward to working with our Zimbabwean counterparts to see where we can help the situation here too.
Other questions? Let's go to the back there, white shirt, lady.
Good afternoon, I'm Dubai from CFM Stereo. My question is, how will you engage with the government on issues related to corruption and transparency?
Well, that was a big part of the conversation I had yesterday with President Mnangagwa. Like I said, we both want better commercial ties. We think that U.S. companies have a lot to offer in terms of transparency, sustainability, respect for the environment, respect for labor rights. And I believe that's why the Zimbabwean government has asked us to bring more U.S. investors to Zimbabwe. So my job here is to tell the story of what U.S. companies and institutions have to offer so that we can be considered a good partner for Zimbabwe and Zimbabwean companies. As far as corruption, that's an element of the investment climate. And so I look forward to talking to the government about how we can improve the investment climate here to make it a more attractive place, not just for U.S. investors, but for companies around the world. It benefits all of us when we're all more prosperous. And like I said, we want Zimbabwe to be a self-reliant, self-sufficient country that can stand on its own 2 feet so that we can work together on the world's problems. That's what it's going to take to reach that economic prosperity.
Across the room, yes?
Okay, thank you so much. My name is Tony. I'm in the TechMed TV. I want to ask from your personal perspective, as far as the U.S. policy is concerned, are we going to be seeing any policy change with the incoming of the new ambassador as far as the way forward from the past policies that you've been running? Maybe it's a second different question altogether. In terms of the sanctions, we've noticed that there's a couple of people that have been removed from the sanctions. If there will be any would-be aggressors, are we going to be seeing those as well being added back to the fresh list of new sanctions?
I'll address the sanctions first, and then you'll remind me what the first question was because I didn't bring a pen to write it down. Our sanctions transition in March was a historic event. We eliminated the Zimbabwe-specific targeted sanctions, and we put many, many fewer people on the global Magnitsky list. The global Magnitsky list holds people accountable for corruption and human rights abuses, but more importantly, it prevents U.S. financial institutions from being complicit in those types of activities. So it's an important tool in our toolbox to reflect our own values. As far as new policy changes, like I said, I want to improve relations. That's what every ambassador wants to do in the country that they come to. And so I'm looking forward to finding new ways to do that with the Zimbabwean government, civil society, business, and all of you.
Next question. Harold?
Thank you. I'm Gibson Nicatino from the Herald. So I wanted to find out from you, you said you are going to respect Zimbabwe's sovereignty during your tenure, but there are geopolitical changes that have happened across the world. For instance, the Russia-Ukraine war, of which the US government has said if you punish African countries that will probably collaborate with the Russian Federation with regards to the issues that happened in February 2022. I wanted to find out from you, how does that not equate to interference with sovereignty, whereby a country is supposed to make decisions in the best of its interest? Then the second question is your normalization of, or rather the commitment to normalize relations between Zimbabwe and the United States. Is it not coming from also the changing dynamics in the world, whereby the issues of China and Russia coming to Africa to develop and put infrastructural projects are not in tandem with some of your objectives, where, from what the previous person asked, relating to you pushing the agenda of democracy, which might not be compatible with the present. Thank you.
That's a lot of questions all woven together. Look, on Russia and Ukraine, we do not want to support the Russian war machine that invaded Ukraine unprovoked in February 22 after having already done so in 2014. So we do not want to work with entities who are going to support that Russian war machine. That war can end tomorrow. All Russia has to do is leave. Ukraine never attacked Russia. Ukraine still hasn't attacked Russia. All Russia has to do is go back to its borders, and this can be over. That is what we support. What was the second part of the question? Remind me.
The Maligning Act, whereby the US said they will impose punitive measures on African countries that will collaborate with the Russian Federation in the context of that.
I don't think that we've offered punitive measures to African countries. We just don't want to support the Russian war machine.
Next question. Here.
I'm Koda with DeTalks. I wanted to find out will the US government continue supporting the Zimbabwe's Condom Programming after 2026?
Which programming?
Condom Programming.
As I said before, PEPFAR, the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, has been possibly one of the most successful initiatives that we've ever taken, particularly in Africa. I served in Zambia in the 2010s, as I told you before, and we never could have envisioned the progress that we've made here in Zimbabwe, meeting the 95-95-95 goals. So it's something that we should all be proud of, because obviously we worked with counterparts here to do that. But it was an emergency plan. It was meant to be an emergency response to a pandemic that threatened the health of the entire world. And now, after 20 years, we need to find a more sustainable way to keep those gains going. And so we'll be talking with the government about how we can sort of right-size that program. But our programs for providing medication and transportation for medication, we support the paychecks of healthcare workers here in Zimbabwe, sorry, old habits. We support the paychecks of Zimbabwean healthcare workers who serve millions of Zimbabweans. We do education so that vulnerable youth do not get infected and we can avoid them becoming sick. All of these programs continue, but we do need to find a more sustainable trajectory for that funding.
Next question. Yes, on the camera.
My name is from South Africa's ET. Ambassador, what's your take on Zimbabwe government's protection of human rights and the respect of human rights?
Well, as I said, we believe that human rights are very rightly enshrined in Zimbabwe's constitution, and they should be protected. Everybody deserves the same dignity and human rights across society and should be allowed to participate inclusively in the prosperity of the country. So we will continue to have those conversations with the Zimbabwean government, because we don't believe that economic prosperity is possible until those rights and freedoms and protections are upheld.
Yes, and there.
National Matter of Marketing for TV. Okay, so our President wants to tell the Russian president that you're consolidating your power in Zambia. Thereby, in the process, you want them to feel isolated. What is your attitude toward this situation?
I just have to strongly disagree and categorically reject that assertion. As I said, I served in Zambia. We have a couple military officers who work in that embassy on military cooperation with Zambian Defense Forces, just like we have a couple military officers in our embassy here working with the Zimbabwean Defense Forces on military cooperation. So, we have been supporting regional organizations on this continent as long as I can remember. I remember working on SADC issues in Mauritius in the mid-90s, in Lusaka in the 2010s, and in when I was doing South African affairs in the late 1990s. So, we've been supporting these regional organizations so that they can work together to solve their problems on their own. And there's simply no reason we would want Zimbabwe to not be a constructive partner to its neighbors.
Any questions before we take a second? Anyone not get a chance to ask a question? Here.
In terms of growing relations with them, do you see any low-hanging fruits to enhance ties between Zimbabwe and the US? Any low-hanging fruits?
Oh, low-hanging fruits. Yeah, like I said, I think work on the investment climate could be a low-hanging fruit. Corruption is a difficult thing for us all to tackle. We handle it, we have to deal with it in the US, and I think the Zimbabwean government has expressed an interest in getting a handle on it here. But there's easy things too, like reducing the amount of bureaucracy that businesses have to go through to register a business and operate in this country. Some regulatory certainty would make it a lot easier. As part of our sanctions transition, we've been talking to US banks and financial institutions and asking them why they don't return to the Zimbabwean market, since the sanctions are not preventing them from doing that. And they rarely raise sanctions. They usually raise the cost of doing business here, the cost of compliance, and the uncertainty around the regulatory and currency environment. So we'll continue those talks with them. We want them to come to Zimbabwe. We want them to serve the Zimbabwean people and to enhance ties between our two countries, but they need to have a business case for doing that. So I think that a low-hanging fruit can be working with the Zimbabwean government on investment climate.
We'll go back to the Herald.
Thank you. Ambassador, I think Zimbabwe is one of the countries is excluded from AGOA, Africa Growth Opportunities Act. But at the same time, I think from your message, you are looking at more economic cooperation and the normalization of relations. During your tenure, is there something that can happen towards that goal, that Zimbabwe can also benefit from AGOA? Thank you.
I think that would be a great aspiration. The things that are called for by the international financial institutions, human rights organizations, and by my own government are often the same reforms. They're in line with international best practices, and they're some of the standards that are set for being involved in AGOA. So I would love the opportunity to work together so that Zimbabwe can meet those criteria and benefit from that really beneficial program.
Time for 2 more questions. Here.
All right, thank you. Okay, thank you, Ambassador. What's your view on the growing influence of Russia in China and Zimbabwe?
In our sub-Saharan African policy, President Biden says it and Secretary Blinken says it all the time. We don't ask countries to choose between us and other partners. African countries, and including Zimbabwe, will choose their own partners. And in most cases, countries will choose to partner with as many countries as they can. That's what governments do. We all want to cooperate the best that we can. So I don't buy into this argument that anyone's trying to make, or at least the United States is not trying to make anybody choose between us and anybody else. I think that we have a good deal to offer in terms of partnership with US government and companies, because we offer transparency, accountability, sustainability, labor rights, we respect rule of law, and I think we have a lot of benefits that can accrue to the Zimbabwean people. So my job here is to make sure that people understand what a good partner we can be.
Last question. Any more questions? Ask anything else?
There was one right here.
I'm sorry, I didn't see the hand.
Right,
Please.
well, former Citizens Coalition for Change President Nelson Chamisa is still singing to his same tune that the election was rigged, it was flawed. That's according to him, not me. Right. And already you're moving in, stepping in to create cordial relations with the government. What is your message to former President Nelson Chamisa?
I don't have a message for Mr. Chamisa. If I do, I'll make sure I call him and talk to him. No, I look forward to meeting him and all of the political actors in Zimbabwe. Again, that's part of a diplomat's job, is to get to know as many people and get to understand as many different perspectives as possible. We had some real problems with the elections here. So did SADC, so did the EU. Unfortunately, we were not able to verify the elections ourselves because our election observers' activities were impeded, so we cannot testify one way or the other. So we do have concerns about the way the elections were run, but in the meantime, I look forward to working with all the political parties to get to understand their viewpoints and see how they interact with each other.
Anything else, Ambassador?
No, I think that's it. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate talking to you and hope to get to know you all better.
Thank you all for coming. If you have further questions, questions, we're always available at HarariPress@state.gov. We have folders at the